Hi there, you are listening to episode 1465 of Stand Up. Can't do any of these shows without your support. This is an ad-free, listener-supported show. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic to support it. And thank you to those who already do. And looking forward to meeting those who have not yet. I'll be hosting a hangout for paid subscribers tomorrow night at 8 p.m. There will be a lot to talk about. As always, joining me on the show today, I've got a very smart guy, renowned scholar and author, who is a professor at the University of Iowa, though he just spent a year doing a fellowship at Harvard. He's got a great book that I interviewed him about a couple of years ago that everybody should own. It's called On Critical Race Theory, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care. Victor Ray is back. Dr. Victor Ray is back. You're going to love my conversation with him. If you want to jump to it, if you want to skip ahead or fast forward, you can hear that about 33 minutes in today. But right now, it's time for your headlines and clips. News and clips, the clip show. Yeah, coming at you. I've got plenty to talk about from yesterday and, 10, 12 clips to share with you, including some great comedy. So let's get after it. Brace yourself. There's a lot of tough stuff to hear as always. These are the abnormal stories. These are the bad news, generally because they're aberrations from the regular behavior of human beings in the world in general, where mostly it's loving kindness. I'll argue it every day, but this is the bad stuff. But remember that. Okay, and the bad stuff is that yesterday news broke that our dear leader is demanding that the Justice Department pay him about $230 million in compensation for the federal investigations into him. And apparently any settlement that might ultimately be approved by senior department officials who defended him or those in his orbit. So the people that are approving it were the people that argued for it. I mean, this is crazy. It's unprecedented. Ethics professor at Pace University, Bennett Gershom, quoted as saying, "What a travesty. The ethical conflict is just so basic and fundamental. You don't need a law to be a law professor to explain it." He said, and then to have the people in the Justice Department decide whether his claim should be successful or not. And these are the same people who serve him, deciding whether he wins or loses. It's bizarre. It's almost too outlandish to believe. A Justice Department spokesperson told the New York Times that officials will, quote, follow the guidance of career ethics officials. The Attorney General, who also incidentally worked as a Trump defense lawyer, Pam Bondi, well, guess what? She just fired the Justice Department's top ethics advisor back in July. So who's going to be the ethical decider on whether or not Trump gets $230 million because he's just thinks he's entitled to taxpayer repayment for the trouble that he endured as a result of his own crimes. So there you go. That is one of the top stories from yesterday. And other stories that have to do with the presidential administration that we have to deal with and wake up and know it's a real thing every day. In a reversal, a White House official said yesterday that Trump has no plans to meet with Vladimir Putin in the immediate future. Just last week, the president announced plans for a meeting with the Russian president. We probably talked about it, and certainly articles, all kinds of things were written about it. It's supposed to happen in Budapest to discuss ways to end the war in Ukraine. So what happened? There's a question mark surrounding next steps in the efforts to negotiate a ceasefire. Ukraine's president visited the White House last week. Of course, we talked about that with Bill Boyle yesterday in hopes of working with the U.S. to push Russia to the negotiating table. But obviously that meeting was contentious. No obvious progress was made. Apparently yesterday, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, got on the phone with his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. And after that conversation, the meeting was canceled. So I'm not quite sure what happened. I don't know that there's much reporting around it, but I thought that was an important thing to mention just in case you were following that. I would think that's pretty important. Are they fighting now? Well, the government is still shut down, now stretched on for 3 weeks. Normally, federal employees would go without a paycheck until Congress passed legislation, but apparently the Trump administration has reprogrammed billions of dollars to pay troops and law enforcement officials. Oh, good. So the troops that aren't really doing anything, and law enforcement officials that aren't necessarily doing anything, because a lot of their jobs, by the way, are hurry up and wait. Sorry about that. Meanwhile, there's a whole lot of other government workers who keep us safe and do all kinds of very important things that are going to work every day and not getting paid. So I always get so irked by this idea that law enforcement and military comes first. It makes very little sense a lot of the time when we're talking about these funding issues, and I'm happy to argue that with anybody who would like to discuss it. Like I said yesterday, Japan elected its first female prime minister. Lots to unpack about that. In other news, Republican state senators in North Carolina approved a new congressional map that would give the Republicans an extra House seat there, so that's really bad. A measles outbreak in Utah and Arizona has sickened more than 100 people. The former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, began his 5-year jail sentence after being convicted on a campaign finance scandal. Imagine that, holding former leaders accountable. France is doing it, at least in this case. Warner Brothers Discovery, which is the owner of HBO, CNN, and the Warner Brothers Studios, considering a sale. Paramount and others have expressed interest, which would create a behemoth, and that is absolutely worth learning more about. The White House has found another group of farmers to infuriate. The American cattle ranching industry is blasting Trump's proposal to purchase beef from Argentina in an effort to lower supermarket beef prices. American beef farmers, none too happy. You'll hear from one in the clip show. Speaking of Argentina, apparently Trump's bailout policy is off to a difficult start. A group of banks, including JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, struggling to put together a $20 billion loan to Argentina without leaving themselves too exposed to the financially distressed South American country. So wait, banks are confusing. 7 of the 9 universities that the White House initially approached about a plan to steer more federal money toward schools aligned with Trump's weird ideas, bad ideas, evil ideas, Christian nationalist ideas, well, they've refused to endorse the proposal. This is big. I talk a little bit about this with my guest, Dr. Victor Ray, in our conversation, but Monday night, an 8th signal had had reservations about it. So only University of Texas suggesting that they might still sign it. Really big story. Very important story right there. These universities in solidarity, not bending the knee and kissing the ring of our mad king. James Comey filed his motion to dismiss criminal charges against him based on, quote, vindictive and selective prosecution. If a federal judge agrees with either claim, both of which generally face high bars to succeed, then his case will be dismissed before it gets to trial. That'll be interesting to see. Yesterday, the stupid man, the Orange Daddy, he got into it with the Australian ambassador to the U.S., Kevin Rudd, who's made no bones in the past that he doesn't like Trump. And in this crowded press conference with the Australian Prime Minister, he said he doesn't like them. He doesn't like the guy, never has. So that's great. Really diplomatic, really nice. The latest on former President Joe Biden's cancer treatment. Well, he was diagnosed with aggressive form of prostate cancer in May, completed a course of radiation treatment Monday, and he underwent several weeks of treatment. According to his office, it's not immediately clear whether he will require additional treatment or measures for his care. He's 82 years old, and those are the news stories I've got for you today. I think they're the most important, impactful ones. I'm sure I missed plenty. Let me know. Send me your ideas for headlines. StandUpWithPete@gmail.com. Speaking of President Biden's cancer, shout out to our friend Leslie Noble and our friend Paul Wesley, who is writing the epistles of Piano Tuner Paul. They are dealing with cancer and going through treatment right now, as well as my friend Susie, who some of you might have met. I don't know that she's gone public, so I won't say her last name here. But if anybody else is going through treatment for cancer or some other disease and want to let us know, we can support you in any ways, let us know. I appreciate it when people talk openly about these kinds of diagnoses, and it also helps a whole bunch of others who will likely get sick at some point in their lives or know someone who will with a similar issue, know someone who's gone through it, and use as a good reference. Amazing people in this community, and if you're dealing with a challenge like that, a health challenge or any other, it's a safe space to talk about and share sometimes. Well, at least with me, privately, and then we can talk about it. All right. Thinking of you guys and wishing you the best all the time. And go subscribe to Piano Tuner Paul's Substack right now. It's really interesting to read his journey. paulwesley.substack.com. I got a link to that. I'll link to it at the end of every day's post starting today. Hopefully I'll remember. If I don't, someone call me out on it. Nobody reads those posts anyway, at least not to the end. But there's a whole bunch of links in there that you can look at. All right, let's get to the clip show I've got for you. First of all, yesterday, chairman of the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and guy who is completely compromised and not real smart, James Comer, talked about the Epstein files and tried to somehow vindicate Trump and implicate Bill Clinton.
Let's be clear. Democrats don't care about transparency or accountability in this matter. The evidence we've gathered does not implicate President Trump in any way. Public reporting, survivor testimony, and official documents show that Bill Clinton had far closer ties to Epstein.
Oh, they're going to try to let him get away with it. Well, come on. Trump was his best friend. Come on. Well, Daniel Goldman went on CNN with Casey Hunt and said a lot more.
I don't even know where to begin. It is a clown show over in the Oversight Committee, but obviously, there's plenty of evidence already, including a letter to Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book, that Donald Trump had some indication of what's going on. We know about the many, many times Trump traveled on his plane. We know about Trump saying he knows about Epstein's penchant for younger girls. And more importantly, they are covering up disclosure of the Epstein files. The Republicans who literally made this a top campaign issue are now going through a very, very complex cover-up. And part of that cover-up is James Comer, because that oversight investigation very specifically does not ask for the types of evidence where Donald Trump's name, likeness would be. Photographs, video recordings, audio recordings, witness statements, the investigation origination documents. The Oversight Committee has not asked for those. The discharge petition that Mike Johnson is preventing Adelita Grijalva from signing by not allowing her to be sworn in, that would require those documents to be turned over. And as a former prosecutor, I believe that is where you would see Donald Trump. So this notion that Bill Clinton should come in for a deposition and Donald Trump shouldn't is preposterous. And the idea that there's no evidence about Donald Trump when this massive cover-up is going to such great lengths as to have this ruse oversight investigation that is intentionally avoiding the most damning evidence should not be lost on anyone, and no one should be fooled.
All right, Congressman Daniel Goldman of New York making the case on CNN. And while we're talking to him, Casey Hunt asked him in that same conversation, you know, you're a New Yorker. Why aren't you supporting Mamdani? What's the deal with that? And not such a good answer, in my opinion.
You're a New Yorker. You have yet to endorse Zohran Mamdani for mayor. Are you ready to endorse him?
You know, I've had conversations with him. I'm not ready to endorse him.
Are you going to vote for him?
I don't know what I'm going to do, to be honest.
You're going to vote for Cuomo?
I don't know. Honestly, I haven't gotten to that point. I've been trying to work through these issues. You know, I'm a Democrat at heart, and I believe in the Democratic Party. I am very concerned about some of the rhetoric coming from Zohran Mamdani, and I can tell you as a Jew in New York who was in Israel on October 7th, I and many other people are legitimately scared because there has been violence in the name of anti-Israel and anti-Zionism. And I've asked him to speak out on that and to condemn that. And I frankly haven't really seen him do much on that. And I believe that, you know, for my personal reasons and as well as my professional reasons as a representative of New York City, that it is my duty to make sure that everybody, including the Jewish community, feels safe here. And many in the Jewish community do not feel safe right now. And I hope that Mr. Mamdani takes that to heart and takes some action to make the Jewish community understand that he will keep us safe and secure.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think he said a lot of things. I think he would do a lot of things. And I think a lot of Jewish New Yorkers, especially young Jewish New Yorkers, support him. So what else could it be? Not a good explanation, Daniel Goldman. I'm sorry. All right. Well, pundit, podcaster, commentator, and real smart Allison Gill over on her show edited together a supercut of Speaker Mike Johnson, Christian nationalist in charge of our House of Representatives, a whole supercut of him saying, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know about things. And it's good. Listen.
Come to think of it, there's a lot that Mike Johnson doesn't see.
Please, that performance in front of the generals, I didn't see it. Is so dangerous.
I don't know what you're talking about with the children. I do know that ISIS...
70 U.S. citizens, according to ProPublica, have been detained by ICE so far since January.
Okay, I haven't seen that, so I'm not going to comment on it. I mean, I don't know all the details of all the individual allegations, and I haven't paid any attention to that at all. I don't know. I haven't...
The letter that President Trump sent to Jeffrey Epstein years ago?
I haven't seen it. I can't comment on it. I've been a little busy today. Well, look, I don't know anything about the dinner. I was a little busy. I have not heard or looked into any of the details of that. I've been a little busy. Look, I've been a little busy on reconciliations. I'm not following all the twists and turns of the Qatar jet. I don't know anything about the meme coin thing.
Are you comfortable with those cuts?
I haven't seen the specifics of that, and I don't know. We have no idea. But as I said earlier, we await further details on what exactly that looks like.
Do you know what he's talking about with the Epstein files? I mean, what is, and why haven't those files been released? Have you? I mean, some of your members have said they got to be released.
As Cash said in the vignette earlier, he's FBI. That's not my lane. I don't know.
You've been busy. You haven't been to work for 76 out of the last 88 days, sir. You're not working 86% of the time. So you actually have all the time in the world to know what's going on in your country.
Yeah, that's your job. If we know what's going on, then why doesn't he? We're all busy ourselves. So, yeah, that's a great job by Alison Gill. Love it. You can watch her now on YouTube as well as listen to her daily podcast, The Daily Beans. All right, let's get to the president of the Nebraska Farm Bureau, and he is pissed about that news story I mentioned, throttling the price of beef.
Hello, ag friends. Hopefully your fall is going well. Some days you feel like you just can't catch a break in agriculture, but the cattle sector is one of the real bright spots here in the industry, and certainly in Nebraska, where we have a lot of mama cows. But unfortunately, we have an administration that thinks that they need to lower the price of beef. President Trump on Friday actually made a statement that said we should lower the price of beef, and ultimately that's lowering the price of cattle. That's not something we need to do. I just want our members to know that Nebraska Farm Bureau is adamantly opposed to anything that would artificially lower the price of beef. We have worked hard to get our cattle market where it is. It's a supply and demand issue right now. But quite frankly, we need this bright spot here in Nebraska. So I have communicated with all of our federal delegation and let them know that we are opposed to any move that would artificially lower the price of beef cattle. They have worked that up to the leadership already today. And so stay tuned as we kind of follow this story. Hopefully we can get this tamped down. But just want to make sure that you know that I'm doing everything that I can as your president of Nebraska Farm Bureau to ensure that our beef sector here in Nebraska and the country continues to thrive. Until next time.
All right. Well, I thought that was really important. Wanted to share that. And I love John Dickerson, one of the last remaining good people over at CBS News. And he does these interesting kind of op-ed pieces, and I often see them. And he did this one about the history of presidents remodeling and redesigning the People's House, the White House. I thought this gave great perspective. Always loved Dickerson.
Whatever your view of the current renovation at the White House to make room for a new ballroom, there could hardly be a more apt metaphor for the presidency. It is a job of stewardship, tending what you temporarily occupy with the knowledge you will pass it on. A president is a mere renter in the finest property in public housing who should not, as Coolidge put it, go ahead blazing new and strange paths. On the other hand, the job was designed for bold action, what FDR called bold, persistent experimentation. The White House has always been a kind of national mirror. Presidents leave traces of their confidence and insecurity. John Adams' inscription on the fireplace, "May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof." Some presidential remodels are practical. Grant put in plumbing and electric lights. Others aspirational. Carter put solar panels on the roof. Reagan took them down. The first White House renovation was involuntary. The British burned it during the War of 1812. Chester Arthur, who sported ornamental side whiskers, filled the East Room with Tiffany glass and Gilded Age ornament. One reporter said it looked like a hotel lobby. His successor, Theodore Roosevelt, quietly took it all out to restore the building's Republican simplicity. A president's house, not a tycoon's parlor. Truman tore out the rotting beams to keep the place from collapsing. Conditions had gotten so bad a piano leg punched through the floor. Jacqueline Kennedy turned the People's House into a cultural showcase, a museum of American taste. President Trump has remade Kennedy's Rose Garden. It looks more like his Mar-a-Lago club now. The new ballroom seeks the same aesthetic. This completes a cultural shift from renovations that preserved or elevated to renovations that personalize. It is the decorating equivalent of a central presidential question. When do the prerogatives of the office serve the people, serve the office, or merely serve the occupant?
All right. There you go. I thought that gave good perspective, good history lesson there. And now let's move to Senator Brian Schatz. He is Democratic Senator of Hawaii, and he went to work yesterday, and he was talking about this remodel. He was talking about the fact that the House isn't working. I thought this was a good clip. He is the deputy whip, I think, so he's a high-ranking Democrat now, Brian Schatz, who his entire life had to deal with being referred to as the past tense of shits.
2 points. The first thing is that this is not about money. There is enough money to bail out Argentina with $20 billion. There is enough money to purchase a brand new aircraft for $173 million for the Homeland Security Secretary. There is enough money to renovate the White House ballroom. What there's not enough money for under this Republican government is you. There's not enough money for you. And it is astonishing to me that the party in charge of the government literally won't show up to work during the second longest shutdown in American history. House Republicans have been gone for more than a month. More than a month. They've worked 2 weeks out of the last 3 months. Nice work if you can get it.
All right, Senator Brian Schatz. There you go. All right, now let's take 2 clips to talk about the unlawful, potentially illegal killings of Venezuelan, are they drug smugglers, fishermen, sightseers? Who knows? Here's Tom Nichols on MSNBC laying it out legally.
This is part of the ongoing tragedy of Congress deciding that it doesn't want to be a co-equal branch of government anymore, that the Republicans in Congress are simply an extension of Donald Trump's personality cult at this point. I mean, the Speaker has to know that under any other circumstances, he, as Speaker of the House, would never say, well, you know, the president has the right to do anything he wants. That's okay with me. That is not how our system of government works. And he knows that. I mean, this is, you know, part of the what's really infuriating about all of this is the dishonesty and the bad faith involved when people like the Speaker say things that they know that they don't believe. No one, you know, really believes that these boats, and General Hertling, I think, pointed this out as well as Rand Paul, these are boats far away from the United States. They may not be anywhere near us. And we have a Coast Guard that exists to intercept them. What the Speaker is affirming is this new rule that the President of the United States, and this is, I would argue this is not about drugs, it's not about Venezuela, it's not about anything else but this new assertion by the President that the U.S. military will kill anyone he points at for any reason he deems sufficient. That is not the American way. It's not the constitutional way, and it's certainly not the American system of government. But that's what Donald Trump, I think, is, and the people around him are trying to establish, that when the president decides someone has to die, the military becomes his personal hit squad. And I think this really can't go on this way. But I actually thought it would have been stopped several dead people ago. But he's making the point, and he's trying to wear us down and get us accustomed to it.
Yes, indeed. Senator Rand Paul's been outspoken on this type of government-sponsored assassination without any type of legal recourse, and he was on TV talking about the same issue, and he makes a lot of sense. I hate to say it.
Number one, there is no fentanyl made in Venezuela. Not just a little bit, there's none being made in Venezuela. These are outboard boats that in order for them to get to Miami would have to stop and refuel 20 times. They're in all likely going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island right off of the coast of Venezuela. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about this. But number one is the broader principle of when can you kill people indiscriminately? When you're at war. That's why when we declare war, it's supposed to be done by Congress. It's supposed to be thoughtful. It's supposed to be debated. And we're not supposed to do it willy-nilly. And then when you have war, you just kill people in the war zone. And even then there are rules of engagement. But interdicting drugs has always been a criminal activity and a criminal anti-crime sort of activity where we don't just summarily execute people. We actually present evidence and convict them.
There you go. All right. That is a very important issue that we got to keep talking about. And this one, too, mentioned the top story, really, yesterday was this idea that Trump's going to sue his own Department of Justice, run by his own people, for $230 million. CNN's one of their legal analysts, Jeffrey Toobin. You know Toobin. Come on, everybody knows Toobin. Anyway, good analysis, even though he's a real weird guy.
Jeff, I mean, this is allowed.
Or is it? There is such a thing as filing claims against the government for malicious prosecution. It's very rare. The Times story is a great story, but it doesn't exactly say how they're doing it. There's something called the Federal Tort Claims Act. There's something called the Hyde Amendment that allows you to sue if you were the subject of like really a bad faith prosecution.
Like the government knew it wasn't true, but they're going after you anyway.
Exactly. There have been very few successful claims under those laws in these circumstances. But obviously, in all of those claims, the defendant is the Justice Department. Here you have the president suing the Justice Department, which is, of course, is run by his appointees, including people who represented him in these cases. So the conflict of interest is just so obvious and egregious. I don't think there would be any way it could be worked out in an ethical way.
Nah, no surprise there. I don't think we needed Jeffrey Toobin to explain that ethics of it all to us, but still helpful. Okay, well, two more clips. They are a comedy. We need some laughs. Let's first check in with Stephen Colbert, who's still hosting the CBS Late Show.
We're just 9 months into Trump's turn, and he's going Hulk smash on the White House. Last time, it took him at least 4 years to bring a demo crew to the Capitol. This is happening after Trump specifically promised his ballroom construction wouldn't touch the existing White House. Here he is talking about it this summer.
It won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of. It's my favorite place. I love it.
So that was a lie. At this point, should we even believe that this is going to end up being a ballroom? It could just as easily end up being a combination Pizza Hut Taco Bell. Nobody.
All right, there you go. Colbert last night, and I've also got a couple minutes of Seth Meyers, who does these rapid-fire jokes in his opening segment. I should pull this and share these more. A bunch of these I thought were real funny. Here he is last night on NBC's Late Night with Seth Meyers.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Seth Meyers. This is Late Night. We hope you're doing well. And now, if you don't mind, we're going to get to the news. Construction workers yesterday began tearing down a portion of the east wing of the White House to build President Trump's new ballroom. You guys, I don't think he's planning on leaving in 3 years. If I had 3 years left on a lease, I wouldn't even put up a shelf. During a press conference yesterday at the White House, President Trump claimed that a cameraman hit a mirror with a piece of equipment. Luckily, no one in his administration casts a reflection. After President Trump praised Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese during a press conference yesterday, Albanese said that he would use video clips of Trump's compliments in 2028 campaign ads. So will I, said his opponent. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is receiving attention online after he was photographed flying in economy class on a commercial flight. Wow, that guy really will eat anything. More than a dozen airports across the country have refused to play a video of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at TSA checkpoints. It just really riles up the dogs. Tesla recently unveiled a cheaper version of its Model 3 sedan that costs approximately $37,000 as opposed to the Cybertruck, which will cost you your friends and family. Come on, I'll give you a ride. Authorities in Los Angeles are looking for a woman who allegedly used dating apps to find wealthy elderly men, pose as a girlfriend, and then burglarize their homes. They're also still looking for a wealthy old man who minds. Yeah, it worked out for me. I couldn't take it with me. A wedding was held recently in New York's Grand Central Station for the first time in more than a decade, while Penn Station held its weekly divorce. The PA system at the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania airport was recently hacked. Officials first became suspicious when it said that a JetBlue flight was set for an on-time departure. And finally, the food brand Johnsonville will reportedly release a new Dr. Pepper flavored sausage. Makes perfect sense since nobody knows what that's made from either. That was...
All right, there you go, everybody. That is the news for you. I got up real early to get it done today, so I hope you appreciate it. If you do, sign up for a paid subscription. I do this daily. It's my full-time job, and if you could support me, that'd be great. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I'm now on Substack, pushing that, and I do believe that your credibility these days is the currency. It's your value. Your reputation is your value. And I've been at this for over 10 years, and I think I have done enough to win the respect and credibility of people for the work that I'm doing. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. I make mistakes all the time. Got to issue corrections, get things wrong, and have over the years, but I'm here and accessible to you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Thank you to all those who do support me. Now, time to get to my guests, because that's the other thing I do every day. I bring on some of the smartest people we can find, and they are always great to join me. And today, Dr. Victor Ray, no exception. He's a real interesting, smart, renowned scholar at the University of Iowa, just spent a year at Harvard, and he was a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. He has written a book called On Critical Race Theory, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care, and that is what I talked about him the first time we talked a couple of years ago, and you can go back and search the archives for that episode, our first conversation, where I learned more about him. Personally, he grew up, as he refers to as white passing, with a black father, and that creates all kinds of issues and complications, including more than once it was reported that he was kidnapped because he didn't look like the guy whose shoulders he was sitting on. It's a crazy life and story, but it all leads into his career in academia and his the papers that he's written. Real good stuff. I had a great conversation with him. Really enjoyed this. We did it live yesterday. Go subscribe to youtube.com/standupwithpete or substack.com/standupwithpete, and you should get alerts at one or both. All right, let's do it right now. Dr. Victor Ray. Dad, very excited to be talking with a very smart guy, college professor and author. He wrote this book, which is so good. And we talked like 3 years ago for the first time, and then I just ghosted him. And I was like, why did I do that? It's because he went to Harvard for a year in between, where he was some kind of fellow. Very impressive. He's at the University of Iowa, but I'm really happy to have back on with me the author of On Critical Race Theory, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care. There's so much to talk about. Professor Victor Ray, welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I guess it must have been quite the culture shock. I mean, you grew up in Pennsylvania, but you're a professor at Iowa. You're raising your son there, and then you did a year in Cambridge. You and your son, your family must have been kind of shocked by the differences in culture of that little part of Boston.
So the culture is different. I think one thing about living in Iowa is daily life is pretty easy in terms of getting around and transportation. I walk to work. So it was a little harder there to get around.
Right.
There's no parking anywhere in Cambridge. Prices are sky high. But, you know, the culture of academia is pretty similar in different places, although I would say the intensity at Harvard is a bit ramped up. And I would say it was actually a very interesting year to be at Harvard, given what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the sort of Trump administration's attacks on Harvard. And specifically, you know, I was a racial equity fellow, and the attacks on folks doing the kinds of research and work that I do.
Yeah, I should have asked that right away. I didn't even think of that. But Harvard under assault by the federal government, specifically the White House, the administration, and you being there doing the work that you're doing, how have you seen the paradigm shift just on that alone before we get to the executive orders, the laws, the court order decisions?
So I think I assumed I'm at the University of Iowa, and we were one of the first states to pass a sort of anti-CRT law targeting elementary schools way back in 2020. And there has been some pressure on the university around teaching diversity and, teaching about race and ethnicity. But I haven't felt it all that acutely. My classes are protected in terms of other states like Florida, in which there's sort of direct intervention in what people are teaching, and I haven't experienced any of that. But I will say, while I was at Harvard, I thought, I'm under a lot of pressure here at Iowa from the sort of national politics, and it's going to be nice to be at Harvard because, they're the richest university in the country, if not the world, and I assumed that wealth and power would insulate them from the attacks. But as a number of folks at Harvard made clear to me, it actually made them the biggest target in the country. And so folks were, I guess the way to say it is being careful, right? So scholars who do the kind of work that I'm doing are making sure that what they say is exact, that what they're claiming in the classroom is based on empirical evidence, not based on opinion about what the administration may or may not be doing. I'm sure people are less likely to admit this, but I'm sure some folks have altered what they're teaching or how they present material for fear of retaliation.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
The administration. Right?
I think my friend Professor Siegel wholly admitted it. He's a con law professor at at Georgia State in Atlanta. He's terrified, especially, when they came for Jimmy Kimmel a few weeks ago, and we've seen so many academics under fire after the Charlie Kirk assassination. So that scared people even more than the initiatives and efforts that you already talked about in terms of the targeting of these universities. So yeah, it's no surprise that people are being careful about what they're saying and what they're doing. You want to add anything to that?
Well, I think there's some irony here in that the right for years has had this whole sort of set of complaints about so-called censoriousness from the left and cancel culture and freedom of speech. And then the moment they get power, they actually implement a series of laws and public attacks that are worse than anything that the left has done in the past 10 years, in which that sort of concerns about cancel culture became to the fore on the right. And so I'll say that. And I'll also say that I think it's important for folks to not, within their power, I don't want people to lose their jobs. I want people to be able to keep teaching. But I think it's really important for folks, given these decisions, to sort of hold the line on what they're teaching, right? Stick to the material, stick to the evidence. But, I teach about immigration, and I taught, there were some ICE raids in downtown Iowa City a few weeks ago. I taught about immigration about a week after. I talked about sort of the Trump administration funding ICE to a degree that puts it within the top 10 militaries in the world. I mean, top 20, excuse me. Let me be clear. Puts it between Canada and Turkey in terms of funding for policing immigrants in the United States, right? And my students came and thanked me afterwards because they were like, there's raids in downtown Iowa City. This is affecting our life, and we don't have a place to talk about this, right? And it is important, no matter what side they're on in these sort of debates, to have the basic information about what's happening. And so, yeah.
It brings me to another question I wasn't really necessarily planning on, but whenever you're talking to an academic, someone like yourself with experience at several universities, published author and all the rest, it's like, it does beg the question as to I think the mission statement is to rewrite how higher education works, how it teaches, and police it and influence it top down from the federal government. And basically, try to make it less liberal. because once you go to college, you tend to become more progressive, more liberal, more, I would argue, open-minded. But there is this huge movement to, I would argue it's very Christian nationalist, to, if I were to shorten it, but a conservative right-wing movement against universities, higher education, to make them, quote, less liberal, less woke. What do you want to say about that, even before we get to some of these other issues that affect the rest of us in terms of the mission against DEI and all the rest?
Oh, I think what you're saying about this mission is very clear. I think that I'll say two things about it. One is that this is like standard process from the authoritarian playbook.
Yeah.
So Viktor Orban in Hungary immediately took over the universities. Authoritarians do this because universities, in the same way that they attack the press, are an independent check on the propaganda that they put out, right? And so I think that's the first thing.
Yeah.
That this is a clear pattern that authoritarians do. The second thing is that the top-down nature of what they're doing is also like really apparent. And I think the clearest way in that is the compact that the Trump administration that was funded by a billionaire put out. And they tried to coerce colleges and universities. There was 9 colleges and universities into signing. And, I read that entire compact. And first of all, it is like absolutely incoherent, right? It starts by saying something along the line, I'm paraphrasing here, but it starts by saying something along the lines of, America has the greatest system of higher education in the world. And I'm like, that's absolutely true.
Right.
And then everything that they're proposing to do to the system of higher education after that would destroy American preeminence in higher education, right? So it would put a check on the kinds of things that people can study. One of the reasons America is so successful in higher ed is professors have freedom to pursue knowledge where it takes us. Limiting that for authoritarian goals is going to make us less competitive.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, for them, it does remove a check. The other thing, I'll say one last thing about the compact.
Just to mention, it's a really important point. 7 of the 9 universities the White House initially approached about plan to steer more federal money towards schools aligned with Trump's priorities. Trump's priorities, is New York Times writing, have refused to endorse the proposal. On Monday, an 8th signaled that it had reservations about it. Only one, University of Texas, suggested it might be open to sign it on quickly. And later they say the compact includes conditions like agreeing that academic freedom is not absolute and pledging to potentially shut down institutional units that purposely punish, belittle, and even spark violence against conservative ideas. This is wild to read about it, but I just wanted to give a little bit more color and support to what you're saying, just in terms of the latest developments on that story, because colleges are standing up against it, not signing it, which is great. They're not bending the knee, right? This is good.
I do think that's great. And I hope that, those are some of the top places in the country. I hope that folks follow suit. What worries me is where colleges are agreeing with the Trump administration, and we can get into some of this around sort of the destruction of diversity, equity, and inclusion on campuses.
Yeah. Because
in some areas like academic freedom, they are pushing back strongly, and that's great. But in other areas, they're saying, they're tending towards resegregation in ways that I think are very dangerous and going to also have long-lasting impacts on higher ed. I do think you did quote a line in there that's really important, though. The line about belittling conservative ideas.
Yeah.
Because what does that mean?
I don't know.
Does that mean if I'm a climate scientist and I teach that global warming is real, I'm belittling conservative ideas?
Right.
If I teach what I teach, which is racism is bad, am I belittling conservative ideas when you have the young Republicans in racist group chats this week? So I think that is a line that is very dangerous.
It's real vague, and that's done on purpose. It's in Project 2025, this attack on higher ed. There are point people in it. The New York Times Daily just had a pretty interesting episode about it yesterday. And then today I also listened to the same podcast, and they had Nicole Hannah-Jones on. One of the things I want to talk with you about is some of the things that they were talking about as well. Because basically what she was saying is, she of course, the author of the 1619 what's it called? The
Project,
yeah.
Project.
And she talked about what's called the nadir, which is refers to the lowest point in race relations in U.S. history, roughly from the end of Reconstruction to World War II. And then, of course, came Jim Crow. And then, of course, came the Civil Rights Movement, which led to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. But then maybe we can, I don't know if we want to fast forward, but I will, to basically John Roberts getting put on the court and the beginning of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, Section 5. And now last week, Section 2 looks like it's going to go. She's basically saying, I'm worried about there being another nadir, another low point in race relations as a result of undoing the Voting Rights Act. And one could argue undoing the Civil Rights Act as well, which creates protections for people of all types, has been added to, has been made more robust, has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate 99-0 up until 2006, by the way, the Voting Rights Act. So you can pick up there because you wrote, a really interesting piece at this very interesting outlet, theemancipator.org, which is eliminating DEI isn't just racist, it's segregationist. And of course we have to talk about DEI, but we also have to talk about something quite different, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act before it, I feel like. What do you think?
You just condensed a lot of history there. And so I want to say, the thing I wrote in The Emancipator, I think, is actually a continuation of some of the things that I was saying in my book about why the attacks on CRT, which sort of morphed into the attacks on DEI, were happening, right? And
yes, I saw it at my school board meetings. It was CRT right into DEI, just as you said. They don't, people that we're talking about didn't even know what those acronyms mean. But go ahead, sorry.
It was the same people. It was
I know.
It's the same propagandists who went from CRT to
I know, DEI, they're my neighbors. I know them.
And so one of the things that happened here was a conflation, and I read the article that the Hannah Jones podcast is based on. Uh-huh. And so one of the things that happened with CRT and DEI was a conflation of, Christopher Rufo, who was sort of the leading propagandist, said he did this on purpose. I'm getting a bunch of ideas that most Americans hate. I'm putting them together and I'm calling them DEI or CRT. And then I'm using that to put forward a sort of conservative movement. And one of the things that I think is really interesting in the Hannah Jones article is she points out that they're saying DEI, but what they're gutting is civil rights laws. So they're getting rid of the protections that, are in. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, it's such an important distinction that you're talking about.
Sorry. I'll pick up there if that's
okay. Go ahead.
Getting rid of the protections, there's a couple of ways that the Trump administration has done this. One is they got rid of an executive order signed by LBJ in 1965 that covered affirmative action in federal contracting, right? This is a huge, huge percentage of the federal government. And and Trump got rid of that executive order.
And the reason why a lot of people, my understanding, work for the federal government because of such protections.
So this is actually a good point that maybe we should start with, is that after the Civil Rights Act passed and, there were federal protections, anti-discrimination protections, the public sector ended up hiring many more black folks in the private sector because the actual anti-discrimination propositions were enforced there. It was easier to enforce them in the public sector than the private sector. So the growth of the black middle class was quite literally based on public sector and often federal government employment. So gutting this, there was a report a few weeks ago about since Trump has taken office, 300,000 black women have been forced out of the workforce. Yeah. That is a result of some of these moves, of gutting DEI, of getting rid of civil rights protections in the federal bureaucracy. And there was another report about the black unemployment rate jumping. I believe it was to 6.7 or 6.8%, a percentage that if it was all of America, we would consider a recession.
So real bad.
The conditions for black Americans in response to this are major. So on the one hand, Trump is getting rid of the laws where he can. The other thing that he's doing is firing enforcement officers. So I think a sort of full-throated attack on the Civil Rights Act that lots of Americans would say, this is bad and we're opposed to this, right? Civil rights still polls pretty well. But you don't need to get rid of the law, and this is the kind of thing that happened under Jim Crow a lot, was that there were legal protections on the books, but local folks figured out ways to undermine those protections, right? And so if you get rid of enforcement officers at the Department of Education, the Department of at HUD, then anyone who brings a complaint can't actually have that complaint adjudicated, right? So discrimination has no remedy, and they avoid the sort of front stage fight that they would have if they came out and said, we're overturning the Civil Rights Act. So it can be a sort of dead letter law. And, lots of scholars, I think Hannah Jones talks about this, but lots of scholars have talked about this is often the way that denying people voting rights during Jim Crow worked, right? Is you had a race neutral law like a poll tax, and folks understood that, when whites went to vote, they weren't going to be forced to pay the poll tax. But it was only going to be enforced on black folks. Or they had literacy tests in which the literacy test was given, but it was interpreted differently based on the race of the person taking the test. So you had neutral sounding laws that ended up disadvantaging people of color. And Trump is innovating, right? The Trump administration is innovating, but we have seen this kind of process lots of times in U.S. history when it comes to disenfranchising people.
It's such an important history. It's very important to pay attention to what's going on because we get settled into thinking, in this case, there are protections for people. And so to not understand the history, why these protections were needed, and then to not understand kind of the present, to know that these protections are being removed is why we're talking to you, why I'm talking to you. It's such an important issue for people to understand and to do something about and to care about and to think about. I think I always get stuck with the fact that these protections were needed because of what was happening in America. And so people kind of understood it to a certain extent, but they understood what we were talking about with racism. What I didn't know was even back then in the 60s, when white people were polled, they thought even back then that they were more likely to suffer discrimination than people of color. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. And I can't believe it when I heard it now. And there was a poll a few years back, and there's this polling every so often, every year. White folks feel like they're more discriminated against than black folks. But that used to be more subtle. Now they're screaming it from the rooftops. Charlie Kirk was the minister of that idea. More and more white people, including young white folks, believe that. What do we do about that? What do you want to say about me muddling through trying to...
What do we do about that?
Yeah, it's more about, I guess my question is, can you smarten up what I'm saying and how true is it?
So I think I think two things. One, there was this polling data comes up like fairly often.
Yeah.
At the height of the civil rights movement, there were lots of white Americans who believed that black people were treated equally. It's just a total detachment from the reality of that era. So that being said, I also think, I don't remember the year that paper that you're talking about came out, but there was a paper, I think it was like 2014 or 2015, that showed that more white Americans believe they were discriminated against than people of color. So I guess the thing that I would say here is the evidence is overwhelming that is simply not true. Right. And so social scientists often do these studies. They're called audit studies, where they send people with equally matched resumes out to apply for jobs. Those studies consistently find that people of color are discriminated against. Right. And it's jobs, it's housing, it's getting a car loan, it's voting now, it's rampant. Right. And so it's detached from reality. As far as what we do, I think
I can answer that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The question isn't so much for you; it's for white people in general, and how we are carrying ourselves. I mean, the best example to me was after Charlie Kirk died, when in a text message group of 19 of my high school friends were all white men. One of them, who we know is a well-known Trump supporter and Christian nationalist, basically wrote this whole tribute to Charlie Kirk and said, I'm not going to be silenced anymore. And now these 18 other white guys had to decide that they're going to react to that no matter what they feel. And of course I reacted, and a couple of others did, and said, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no, man. Not here. Not ever. You're wrong. And so my larger point is white folks have to tell other white folks the score. I just thought it was the case because I had eyes and ears. But until I really started having more thoughtful, more intimate conversations with people of color as I got older and watching documentaries, did I know the extent of it, some of which you just covered, much of which you just never think about, you never know about, including the statistic around, job applications and name sounding and all of this stuff and college acceptance and all of it.
Right.
And so I think my answer is, and that's why I cut you off, because as a white, as a bien blanco, it's us. We have to do stuff. We have to say stuff. We have to be at the forefront and trying to create this change, because it's not going to be people of color, not their job, and it's not convincing when they tell white folks things, apparently. It was to me, but.
Right. So it's not, I think it's not always convincing. I mean, I would also say when people ask me, I get this question a lot, and I'm like, we don't know what will work, so pick a lane and do something.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So I'm like, I teach, I write publicly, sometimes I organize, but pick a lane and do something. And if you read the history of the civil rights movement, yes, it took people marching in the streets, but it also took a lot of people making sandwiches, right? It took a lot of people.
And delivering those sandwiches. And doing child care. And we're seeing this, you can speak to it in terms of what's going on with the immigrant community, because that's what we're really looking out for them. I mean, their parents are being deported, their families being separated. They don't want to go to work. And so a lot of that work is being done in cities across the country. A lot of good people getting into good trouble, trying to take care of those families. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just you could speak to the specifics of that issue with these quote undocumented folks.
The specifics of,
I mean, just the fact that people are looking out for them, and I hear a lot about it in Southern California, especially.
So I think there's a lot of mutual aid and organizing happening around protecting those folks. I think there's also sort of like a lot of fear, and one thing that's different and sort of like not in the civil rights narrative that I write about and Nicole Hannah-Jones is writing about, one thing that's really different now is the attack on immigrants. And I think, the expanded ICE raids and the sort of shutdown of the border create a context that's very different than the civil rights movement, and is going to require new strategies and new coalitions to push back.
Yeah, I guess I haven't really thought that much about it. I didn't. Immigration was not the issue then that it is now for any number of reasons. The economy wasn't.
Well,
then.
Also because the laws changed following the civil rights movement, right? So we changed our civil rights laws in 1960, not our civil rights, immigration
laws
in 1965 because of the sort of racial quotas, and that change has created sort of a new set of issues around immigration.
I think just
that the right is reacting to.
You talk and teach about immigration, and just quickly, I feel like when we see the tragic work that they're doing to deport brown folks, especially, and also not let new brown folks into the country, whether it be the southern border or, Muslim and Arabs or others, and import more white people, apparently. I mean, it's
right.
Try to hard. We see all this, and most notably, we see ICE on the street and beating the hell out of people that are just doing their jobs. All of that is where we get the reaction from. But the solution, to me, part of the solution has always been to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And people don't think about this, and they don't realize it. And when they say they try to both sides it, and what pisses me off so much is that Democrats with a bunch of Republicans in 2013 almost passed it, if not for John Boehner wouldn't take a vote because it was going to pass the House. It was good. It passed the Senate. He would not take the immigration reform law. He would not put it on the floor. I think that's one of the most important moments. And what we're seeing on the streets right now, not only that, but at the end of the Biden administration, they were again going to pass immigration reform that would have been even bigger and spend even more money on security, by the way, than they did in 2013. But Trump scuttled it when he was running for office and said, don't you dare pass that. I need that as an issue. And if anybody's going to pass it, I'm going to get credit for it. How much of the issue that we're seeing right now would be solved or on a way to be, making things better if you created all the reforms, including all their security measures that they want, but pathways to citizenship, DACA, education, you can buy into health insurance. You want to pay for it. It's ridiculous that they're not allowed to buy it. And finally, obviously, work permits.
So I think it's hard to tell. I think a lot of the issue around immigration isn't actually based on immigration policy. I think it's based on demagoguery, right?
Yeah, well, definitely, because yes.
And so I think both of those examples that you've just passed have shown an unwillingness and an unseriousness about solving the problem because, and look, I think both of those bills had still massive problems, right? They weren't free of sort of the demonization of immigrants and targeting. But there is an unwillingness because Trump sees immigration as his always winning demagogue position, and he's not willing to give that up. I also think the party has moved, and in some ways the country, but definitely the party, has moved to the right so far on immigration that they're quite DHS is quite literally posting neo-Nazi memes on their Twitter profile.
That's right.
Right. And so I think some of this is not about serious policy.
No, your
policies to harm. It's about demagoguing and using immigration to get political power.
You're absolutely right. And the other point I try to make when talking about immigration is that it's the one controversial issue in America, unlike climate or fossil fuels, unlike guns, unlike healthcare, that doesn't really have a special interest lobbying against it. Because in fact, all capitalists love immigrant labor, and most religious institutions were leading on things like refugee resettlement. So there isn't a special interest lobbying against immigration. It's more likely that they're lobbying for immigration so they can get folks to come here and work and so on and make money off of them. But you said Trump and other right-wingers demagoguing it. I would just add, and obviously you meant this and know it too, it's the right-wing media which makes a tremendous amount of money demonizing and demagoguing immigrants as well. And I would argue that they wag the tail of elected Republicans in this country far more than on the left. But
that was one of, you were talking, we're doing ancient history now, but for Boehner, part of the reason he wouldn't bring it was right-wing media. Part of the reason he didn't want to get a vote was right-wing media was so.
Oh, no doubt. That's true of guns as well. It's not even the gun lobbies and how much money they spend as much, because campaign finance, ironically, I think matters a little less. It's the actual right wingers going, don't you dare put a law against silencers. Okay, sorry. I could keep you here all day and talk about this issue, but let's do it again real soon. Any final thoughts? I didn't really even get as much to your piece about DEI. It's a provocative piece, but I think it's true. Eliminating DEI isn't just race, it's segregationist. Can you just say a bit about that before I let you go?
The argument of that piece is very similar to the one that Nicole Hannah-Jones and others have made. If you get rid of civil rights protections, the country will resegregate. And so it's weird because the Trump administration has not come out and said we are segregationists, but everything that they have done around these issues is in line with the kinds of laws that existed under Jim Crow segregation, right?
How will we resegregate? We're pretty segregated as it is.
So I think, the evidence of 300,000 black women being pushed out of the workforce is a kind of resegregation. The early evidence of schools letting in fewer black and Latino students since the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action is a kind of resegregation. And then the evidence that there's lots of employment discrimination in the labor market, if folks know that they're likely to be unchecked for doing that, I think that will increase too.
Gosh.
But you are right. We are pretty segregated as it is.
We self-segregate in a lot of ways. It's always bothered me personally because I'm the guy who likes to float on over to the group of Indian folks or Asian folks and always the black folks because comedy. Humor, really, more than anything else. When I learned that in college, I was like, okay, I have a lot more to learn and still learning, especially from you. Get the book if you haven't already. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Professor Victor Ray on critical race theory. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for everybody watching live. Can't do this without you. Your excuse, sir. You can punch out if you got to go. I really appreciate you doing this, though. All right, there he goes. Dr. Victor Ray. I hung up on him. No, I didn't. It just ended. On Critical Race Theory is the book. Go get it and let him know. You can find him on Blue Sky as well. Follow him and let him know that you heard him here on the show. That's all I've got for you today. Hope you appreciate it. Hope you liked it. Hope you learned from it. Hope you got some laughs. Hope you were informed, inspired, maybe even. Hope you weren't too terrified and scared by the news and everything that's happening in the world. We've got each other. Hope to see you tomorrow night at our hangout, building our community out slowly but surely, adding amazing new people to it. Hope to see you at the hangout tomorrow night. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You can hang out with us in November. Well, just a few weeks away now, November 6th in Virginia. John Carroll, who you're listening to right now, johncarroll.org. The debut or the album release concert party show is going to be great. We're going to be there, a few of us. So if you want to join us, hope to see you there. johncarroll.org. Talk to you tomorrow, everybody.
Sunlight, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, so they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. Stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be told up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand